Welcome to the Worship Keys YouTube channel. My name is Carson Bruce. So glad you're here. We talk all things music theory, gear, industry, and ministry for your worship keys playing. If this episode is beneficial for you or you have any questions as you continue to watch, feel free to comment below, and I'd love to hear any feedback that you have along the way. So let's get into today's episode. All right, guys, part two with Evan Fernald from The Belonging Co. Evan, welcome back.
So great to be here.
It's going to be a good time. Last episode was all about sound design. Really enjoyed it. All of your sounds, all the textures, everything that's involved with that, the intentionality, your heart behind it, the why, all of that in last episode. So if you missed it, definitely check it out. But today's episode, Evan, you're going to intro us a little bit into Tracks World, and also get down to some really nitty-gritty details of how you guys run Tracks. What's your philosophy with Tracks? And give us a little bit of intro.
Yeah, so honestly, very much the same heart, like we were in our conversation about production, how we can utilize these tools, but we don't want them to ever take precedence or lead the way. We want them to be able to follow any moment that we're in as if it were another musician. And so all of the setup, the programming is done very intentionally to that end. It's not a lot of crazy things. You can go absolutely nuts with having it fire all sorts of different things. We've kept it intentionally simple, but very, very specific to allow us to be spontaneous, to flow, to go off map, and Tracks doesn't have to bail every time. I think sometimes we're like, I want to use Tracks maybe, but I don't want to be locked into that arrangement. And if we want to change, I don't want there to be a weird, awkward moment where you just got to like hard stop and you feel that energy suck out of the room. So we've done some very intentional things to allow Tracks to remain in the mix. If they're enhancing, and this is a big training point with me and our playback team, I was like, if these are ever getting in the way, get them out of the way. Again, I never want this to be the thing. So that's the philosophy and the heart with which we approach programming and using Tracks.
That's amazing. And you guys are doing a lot of original tracks from time to time, or actually maybe every Sunday? Do y'all do an original every Sunday?
It's quite possible. We don't necessarily intentionally lean one way or the other, but obviously the bigger our song catalog gets, it's easier to do that.
Of course. And are you the one who actually builds it, or do you have a whole team that builds it?
Yeah. Initially, that was actually one of my early roles on staff, was being responsible for the Tracks setup and getting this developed. And so initially it was me building all the sessions, and realized as the church grew and the team grew and services grew and locations grew, that was not really sustainable. Tapped on some of the guys that were on the playback team that were a little more knowledgeable with Ableton and brought them in. And now I've got a team of, I believe there's about 5 of us that are building sessions for all the services that need them.
Amazing. And you'll probably hit on this too as you get into it, but you guys have a separate person that runs the Tracks? Yeah.
So in our Nashville location, which is our main broadcast location, there is always somebody running playback. A dedicated position, side stage, they're right next to our monitor console. And we are building the teams in our other 2 locations right now in Franklin and Columbia, starting to add that position more. But we don't fully have the teams built out yet. And so there will be Sundays where it's run by the keys player, who's also our MD at the other locations. Yeah.
What tips would you give to a church that maybe wants to include someone who can, a playback tech, as you say, or like they do in the touring world as well? That's very common in the touring world, maybe not in the church world. But what tip would you have to a church that wants to incorporate that way? The drummer or the guitarist, the keys player doesn't have to be the one to also fire the tracks.
Yeah. I think existing team is a great place to start without overextending people's serving capacity. Because if you're wanting to approach tracks in the same way with kind of flexibility and spontaneity, having somebody that already knows the culture of the team and knows the flow of the team is really going to be a huge advantage for that person, not being caught by surprise when the worship leader decides to go back to a chorus or end the song early. Or they're already going to know what to listen for and look out for and be able to recognize those cues. So that's a great place. It can also be a really strong first position for potential new team members, especially positions that are really impact the dynamics, like drums. We've had some drummers that started on playback, and you get a sense of how the team flows and those same kind of principles. And then the first Sunday that they stepped out behind the kit, they're already phenomenal players, but they just had a sense of how the team flows together. And immediately there was an ease and a fluidity to them moving into that position because they had been around it. They'd heard all the calls. got to know the tendencies of everybody. So really strong position to implement.
That's great. Okay, in 90 seconds or less, what would you say to that person? Because we get these comments a good bit whenever we do anything tracks related here on the Worship Keys, but there's always someone, maybe multiple people, that say, we're definitely never going to do tracks because it quenches the spirit.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit's no longer there. It's a production. All of a sudden now we're a touring band and we got to have all this, that, or the other. Tracks are definitely going to prohibit the Holy Spirit. What would you say to those comments to that person directly?
Yeah. I think like any creative tool, it's up to us and how we're approaching implementing it and using it. When you think about what are tracks, like what is actually happening, it's pre-recorded music. Because it's not somebody playing it live doesn't make it less musical. It's actually written to be intentional within the context of that song. It can add some beautiful textures. Sure, you can take it to a place where it's leading the charge, and then, it's out of balance. And I'm actually personally of the opinion that at the end of the day, as a worship team and a worship band, we should be able to play music. So if that fails, it shouldn't it shouldn't be like the end all, I guess we got to finish worship early. So don't let it get to there, but that's on us. Yeah. We can actually influence that.
Totally.
A laptop doesn't have that much power unless we give it that much power.
Yes, yeah.
And so I think it's all about our approach, our posture, and how we implement it. You can absolutely implement it in a way that it enhances but doesn't get in the way. Perfect. And you can take it too far to where it's running the show. And I would agree in that case, that's inappropriate. Yeah, it's too far.
Good stuff, man. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Again, if you want to hear a little bit more about Evan, how we got to Belonging Co., you can check out last week's episode if you haven't already. And you want to know his sound design, check out last week's episode. But let's jump in to tracks. Before we do, which, by the way, there's like a list of 10 other questions I could ask you, Evan. If we had more time, time is always of the essence. But just one simple question I've asked to a few of my guests too. But what's your one advice to brand new worship keys players? Maybe they're in the beginner stages or intermediate and they want to go up a level. What's your greatest advice, one advice to the worship keys players today?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think one, the fact that you are wanting to go further is a huge first thing, because I think there's an important principle that people that don't want to excel don't. And so the fact that you're even here watching this, you're hungry to grow and to learn. Huge. Like that foundation alone, you're going to do amazing. Yeah. And I think just start, be a student, just start digging in. You're going to find the things that work for you. Don't feel like, I know this is multiple things, I'm sorry, but don't feel like you have to be a clone of what somebody else is doing. Learn principles more than copying a thing. Right. What principle is this person implementing? Absolutely. And how can I extract that same principle?
Good stuff, Evan. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing, man. All right, so let's jump into Tracks World. Yeah.
All right, so let's take a look at tracks. This is an interesting world to dig into. I actually really love talking about this because I know there's such a wide spectrum of opinions and thoughts and approaches, and so we'll kind of look at the way that we set it up. I think one of the criticisms that tracks might get is that it's too rigid or it doesn't really allow for flexibility or spontaneity. And I feel like we've just landed at a really good spot where we can utilize tracks and have the kind of the sonic enhancement that provides to the service, and are in no way limited in where we can go in the service. If we want to repeat sections, go back into the song, end the song early, go to a completely different song. We need a different tempo, a different click, whatever the case may be. Here's a quick look at how our session is laid out. Very briefly, I don't want to spend too much time on session layout because this can be a bazillion different ways, but just a couple of song identifiers, what song it is, the song sections, time code. We run time code for some of our lighting sequences. Our lighting system is also designed, though, to be able to just go full manual. So we're not dependent on time code. It's there to help. If it starts to take over, our lighting engineers can just take manual control and run it that way. IAC control, we use the IAC MIDI bus to control a couple of things. A clip that tells the playhead to stop, a clip that tells it to loop to the last locator. That's how we do click loops. So that's something that there's, I'm sure, countless videos on how to engage that and set that up. Don't really want to dig into the nuances of that, but that's what we're using it for, those two commands. And so we have our click channel, guide, group with all of our keys, stems. Most of our programming that we run in tracks is going to be coming from extra keys and synth parts, pad parts, things like that. We run very minimal guitars. All these are deactivated. We might run an extra rhythm track or something that's a little more ambient, but most of all of our guitar stuff is all coming from the live players. Perk, any kind of drum loops and shakers and booms and bangs and all that kind of stuff's coming from there. The BGVs, gangs, choir stems, we don't always run a ton of this. If we have a choir weekend, we'll definitely run some of that to fill out the vocal parts a little bit. So a lot of times, though, these are just turned off and it's just our vocal team in the room. So that's what we're running. Here is, I use return tracks as our output buses. So all of these groups you can see are routed to one of these 4 output buses. Here's where we specify which output to the interface is going to be going out to. It's set up that way so that if we ever were in a situation where we had to condense that and just use a stereo left right, I could just quickly come in here and change all of these to output 3 and 4. I don't have to go in and reroute a bunch of individual stems or change a bunch of the routing. I just need to change it right here. This is a kind of a headphone monitoring bus, which is what we will be hearing right now. And you can see all of these output buses are being sent to that. It's a great way to be able to program your session if you're using just laptop speakers. You don't have to have your interface with you. You'll still be able to hear everything, and then as soon as you plug in your interface, it'll toggle over and all of these outputs will become active and you can deactivate this. Easy way to be able to build sessions without constantly changing your output routing. Okay, so let's look at the few things that are really intentional to be able to build spontaneity and flexibility. So first, and this is probably commonly used by a lot of people, is having locators at the top of every section of the song. Because in Ableton, locators are interactive. You can actually select a locator while it's playing, and it can, in time of the song, jump back to that section without skipping a beat. Very seamless, so that's really crucial for this to be able to work well. The other thing that we have is at the end of every song, we have a pre-programmed click loop at the tempo of the song. If there's ever a time where things are getting wonky and we maybe got off on the tracks or whatever, and we just kind of need to get tracks out of the way, we can just skip to that click loop. We didn't lose the click. We can stay in time. It's not throwing the team for a loop where everything drops out. It's like that safety thing. And the other component is at the end of every song where there's the possibility that we're going to flow, which in our case is a lot of times, like at The Belonging, we do a lot of spontaneous flow, just going off map and responding in the moment. And so we want it to be able to keep the door open for that. And rather than getting to the end of the song, losing the click, and then having to try and bring it back, it just automatically keeps the click going. It rolls right into a click loop, and we can just keep playing along with that. On that note, there's one thing that's actually multi-purpose, and you'll see the second purpose here in a minute. During the song arrangement, when the song is playing, we have an accent on the click. So you can hear what that is. So top of every bar, we have that accent happening. As soon as we get to the end of the song and it just rolls into that click loop, accent goes away and it just turns into an unaccented click. So a couple reasons for that. One, for us, there's times where we'll get to the end of a song and maybe we'll crash out and let it hang for a second. And maybe we lose that downbeat. We're not sure where the downbeat is anymore. And I don't really want to be locked to that. I don't want to have to wait for the next downbeat to roll around if we want to pick up the progression and keep playing. So I want to, as the MDE, be able to just at any point count in, all right, let's go back to bridge progression, 2, 3, 4. And I don't have to worry about, am I on the accent? Do I need to wait? Did I just missed it? I need to wait a bar. It just introduces moments of having to think about extra stuff, or we can't respond as quickly because we're having to wait for that next downbeat. So that was very intentional to get rid of the accent in that point. So you get to the end of the song, band's holding, not really counting anymore. Now let's go back to the bridge, and 2, 3, 4, and band's on 1. And you can see in the timeline, if we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, we're not on Ableton's downbeat anymore, right? You can see that we were like in between bars. Normally, if it's like we want to be able to potentially bring the tracks back in at some point, it's really important that we're on the same downbeat as Ableton. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to match back up with us without a little bit of finagling of how it's counting, or we're going to have to actually physically stop the computer and then restart it on the band's downbeat, which is a way you can do it. That's great. I wanted to be able to find a way to do this with as little interaction as possible, with as little thinking as possible in terms of like, where's Ableton at? I just want to be able to go a couple little, maybe one button push, a couple moves on the faders, and we're good. So how we approach that is every song has a time signature, usually 4/4 or 6/8. So that's what Ableton is counting in when we're in the arrangement of the song. There's the session quantization setting, which if you're not familiar with that, that basically tells Ableton how long to wait until it executes the command that you just gave it. So if I have it set to 1 bar and I tell it jump to that chorus, it's going to hang on to that command and go, great. I'm going to wait until I get to the next downbeat at the top of the next bar before I do that. You can change that setting, but you have to be careful when you're giving it commands, or you might actually make Ableton's count to jump. You might make it skip beats, and then you've made tracks off with the band. The band didn't get off, you got off on tracks. So 1 bar is almost always the best place, in my opinion, to run your session quantization, because it's going to, whether you're 4/4 or 6/8, it's going to hang on to waiting for that next downbeat before it goes there. So the problem with that now is we get to the click loop, and as we just discussed, the accent goes away. I'm not caring about that anymore as the MD. I'm not listening for that. I just want to be able to count and go. So now we're in the scenario where I've counted us in and we're off Ableton's downbeat. So when we get into this click loop, you'll notice up here that we've added a time signature change. So we've gone from 4/4 out here in the song arrangement to 1/8, and a little bit of rhythmic music theory. We know time signatures is how many beats are in a measure and which note subdivision gets counted as 1 beat. So in 1/8, the 8th note is going to get 1 beat, and there's going to be 1 beat per measure. So now what we forced Ableton to do, with a little bit of nerdage, as I like to call it, is now we're forcing Ableton to count every single click as a bar. So without having to interact or change the session quantization setting, without me having to physically start or stop and restart the computer, as soon as it hits, the playhead hits this click loop, it's going to start counting, and we can see this up here in the transport window. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So now the next command I give it, the very next click, the very next count, it's going to see as the next bar, and that's when it's going to execute that command. So the timing becomes a little bit important, not a little bit, a lot important, but it gives me the ability now, regardless of where the band's downbeat is, I can make Ableton rematch up at the very next click, the very next count, I can make it match up. So let's see what that would look like. And first, you're going to hear the audio jump back in because we haven't looked at the faders and whether those are doing yet. So we'll get to that. But just so you can hear the timing of what's happening, we're going to leave all the faders up. Okay, so we get to the end of the song. And band is washing. Okay, I'm not looking at the screen. MD counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and I actually matched up with a downbeat on accident. Let's pretend I didn't do that. So now we're on 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where the band is at. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And then we say we want to go back into that bridge, okay? So I don't have to worry about where Ableton's count is. I just have to listen to the band, and I'm going to press my button over here that's going to jump back to the bridge locator, and I'm going to press it on the upbeat in between clicks, okay? A little bit of practice. This actually gets a lot easier than you'd think, okay? I'm going to think and and So I'm going to hit it on the upbeat, okay? So we're going to go back to the bridge. So the band is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So we went back to the bridge, and I matched up with the timing of the band, even if Ableton was counting with the band or not. So that's a great way to be able to reintroduce tracks. I don't have to worry about Ableton's count. It opens up some flexibility there. Let's look at what's happening over here on the faders. Here on our output buses, we expand that, we can see there's a couple of filters happening here. So as I move these faders down, these filters are closing. And we actually really like to use filters versus volume to bring tracks in and out. And a filter, if you're a keys player, like I'm sure you probably are, you're very familiar with how a filter works, right? So we're approaching tracks with the same mentality that we would approach our pads. If they're all the way open, it's letting the full frequency spectrum through. Everything is present. We're hearing everything. As we start to close the filters, starting on the top end and a little bit on the bottom end to keep it from getting too boomy, it's going to start to slowly filter everything out, right? So to me, this feels more musical than just a volume. And as we start to bring tracks back in while a band is playing, it's definitely more seamless to me, especially with like perk that might have shakers and things going on. If I just faded that up with volume, you would still have all that high-end energy coming in at a lower volume, but the band might not be big enough for that to make sense yet. So you get more of a is filtering in like that. Let's see what that would look like in conjunction with our click loop, our timing of everything. So let's say we get to the end of this song, Mighty Name of Jesus. Okay. Now we're flowing with the band and we want to bring tracks back in. I'm going to start by turning all of my faders down. So I'm going to turn all of the filters down. The guide is really important. I want to get rid of the guide because in this scenario, we're off map. We're flowing. We're in spontaneous world. I don't want the guide coming in and trying to give us call sections that we're not ready for. So in flow moments, I will almost always leave the guide out. I'll never bring the guide back in. So now we want to join the band and bring the tracks back in. Say they're reprising the bridge. Okay. So now this kind of brings back up our accented click and the purpose of that. Okay. All of my filters are down. All the volumes are closed. So if I skip back into the bridge now, I can't hear the tracks. Like we're in the bridge. You can see the bridge is playing. I can't hear anything, right? What can I hear is that click. Okay. So we go from unaccented click, and that's an indication to me that I've gotten the timing right. Because what I want to hear is that accent come back in and match up with where the band is at. So say the band is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I hear that accent match up. Now I know my timing is correct. I've gotten the timing right. I can confidently start to bring tracks back in. I might start with just the keys programming first, leave the perk out. Let's repeat that bridge. Slowly start to filter that back in. And this we can adjust to match the band dynamic. If they're not that big yet, we can keep it down. We're going to do one more bridge, keep building it up, start adding the perk back. So now we're back in all the way up, except for the guide. So tracks are back in, we're with the band. And at this point, I can continue to do that even. And that's why even on this iPad, I have all of the same notes. I have the chord progressions, all the same elements. And so depending on the song and what's happening in the stems, they might even go into a spontaneous free worship moment, singing something completely different, but with the chord structure of the song we just played. That'll happen quite often with us. I know I'm in a song where I've got a chord progression that the band is playing, say that they're flowing and vamping on the chorus of More of You, then I can actually follow along and bring tracks in even if we're not playing that song. If they're playing 4, 6, 5 with a passing 3, then it's cool. I could... So I can still play along with them on tracks even if we're not in the song. And having them split out even independently, having different faders is cool because we've A lot of us might have been in the scenario where we're vamping on a section and maybe the worship leader turns around, let's do a drum chorus. Okay, so say we've rebuilt the bridge and the worship leader turns around and goes, hey, let's do a drum chorus, points to the drums. So we go, just drums, 3 and 4 and... So the drums are in. Maybe we've got the big choir going. We want the vocals to stay in. We'll keep that in. Band starts to rebuild. Kind of break it down from there. So you can work all of these different groups, bring the filters up and down, sections in and out, and you'll find with just those few controls, you can actually follow quite a bit with a band and keep tracks rolling and maintain all kinds of flexibility and spontaneity. So what's cool about this too is we actually have at our main Nashville location, we have a dedicated playback team. So that's only what they're doing. They're focused completely on this. And you can do a lot if this is your only role and you're just focused on this and paying attention to the worship leaders and the MD calling, you can do a lot. But what's really cool is with these control surfaces, you can actually do quite a bit of this while playing an instrument as well. I'll do this. I'll play keys and run tracks, especially when we travel with the team. Some of our other locations are still set up where the keys players will run tracks out on stage. So you can do it either way. And like the way that this is set up for me is I have all of my keys controls and tracks controls on one interface. Keys controls, as you can see here, keys and tracks all on one iPad, so I don't have to have multiple interfaces. It's flexible to be able to do either or when it's set up like this. All right, so you may have seen in the last episode, we were doing quite a bit with this little fader controller over here. So let's talk about what this is. It's made by Intech Studios. This particular model is the PBF4. They make multiple different versions of it, but it's going to be similar to like your Korg Nano Control, just an 8-fader MIDI controller. It's got knobs and buttons. I actually used a Nano Control for a very long time. They're absolutely great. I was after something that maybe was a little bit more robust. After many years of using my Nano Control, faders started to go. The MIDI signals were jumping around, sending some random stuff. For a while, I ended up landing with a Studio Logic mix face, very similar to the Nano Control. A little bit larger footprint. Faders and knobs were a little bit larger, easier to identify. It had like markings on the knob, the position of the knob. So on darker stages, it was easier to just see. That worked great for a couple years and then just started having some random dropouts. I went on the hunt again for what my next thing was going to be and landed with these guys, and they're modular. So they actually come in sections of 4 and they have different models. Some of them only have faders. Some of them only have knobs. There's one that's all buttons, a few other varieties. So I have 2 of these. They snap together magnetically. I have them secured with just some tape. And to program them, it gets a little bit nerdy, which is fun because it uses a programming language called Lua that it's literally you're in there writing some code. And there's a software program that kind of gives you access to doing it. But there's a little bit of a learning curve there. There are templates that you can just download to the device that kind of gets you up and running. And then you can modify from there, which is what I did. I found a template that just sends MIDI CCs, modified what color the lights were, and that's where I'm at. The next step for me was obviously you probably saw in the keys segment, I have a lot of stuff that just sits on my keyboard. I don't necessarily like having a lot of extra stands of things. So I like it sitting on the top of the keyboard. The Nord has the mod wheel and the pitch stick over there. There's a small area that's available for devices. And so I wanted to try and find a way to mount this on some sort of stand. And so I found this is a guitar pedal riser made by Mono that is just about the right width. It hangs off just a little bit, but I Velcro that down and put a little bit of anti-slip rubberized backing on that. And so it sits perfectly over the mod wheel and pitch stick. It doesn't make contact with any of the buttons. It's a little heavier because this is steel. So it doesn't really slide around and everything feels really great. Faders feel great. They've just recently done some updates as well to get version 3 out there. Yeah, check these guys out. They're making some really great stuff. Okay, so the last component we want to look at here is, let's say we go into a song that's completely hasn't been planned, it's not on the list, we don't have a click programmed at the right tempo. So what we did here is at the very end of our session, we have just a bunch of clicks ranging from 66 BPM all the way up to 90. In most cases, we're going to be within that tempo range when we're flowing. There's been a couple of songs that we've added to our rotation lately that kind of go down to the 64 range. So I'm actually about to go in and add those slower tempos in, so we've got them available as well. But this can look like, say we come to the end of this song, our third song, More of You, and the worship leader calls, hey, I want to tag into Worthy of It All or something like that. And it's maybe closer to, we're at 75 BPM right now. We want to get down closer to 71 or 72. If I go to 75, there's going to be no change. It's going to sound seamless because Ableton's going to keep it all in time. Open this up. So it went straight there, no change to the tempo. So what we'll do sometimes is if we want to get down there gradually, then I can just come in here and go 74, 73, 72. Or I could go from here. If we know what we want to be at, we want to go straight to 72. And again, because the session quantization and the time signature being set at 1/8, it's going to immediately go to that slower tempo the very next click. So it's very responsive. It can very quickly speed up or slow down. And if, again, I'm in a scenario where I'm playing and I don't want to have to look over, if say I forgot what tempo I just hit, and I know I want to be faster or slower, then in that case I can just go bring me down one or speed me up. So you can still flow with just a click at various tempos. We'll even do it where we'll flow between a couple of songs that are maybe different by a couple of BPM, and so we can seamlessly make those changes here. And the team might not even really know it, but you feel the difference of that faster or slow tempo. So very helpful page to have and section of the session to have set up with all these different clicks.
Guys, I hope y'all enjoyed that episode with Evan Fernald from Belonging Co. here in Nashville. You probably love the Belonging Co.'s music. If you've never heard TBCO, Belonging Co., we'll link their music here. They're working on a brand new album right now. You guys are always working on new music, aren't you?
Pretty much, yeah.
What's your favorite song to play on the keys? What's your favorite song from Belonging Co.?
Oh, my goodness.
I got to ask you that, too.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm loving Mighty Name of Jesus is really great. That's a tough one. Because
there's the fun,
Sorry,
faster song, there's the synth stuff, there's the flow, and
I know.
Anyway, well, awesome. Definitely check out their music, guys. And Evan, we'd love to have you back sometime whenever we can. We had David Ramirez, who's connected with you guys at Belonging Co. Incredible producer, sound designer, keys player, just a great guy, great man of God. But we had him featured 3 weeks in a row. So if you want to hear from David Ramirez, you guys can do that. All about sound design, especially if you're working in studio environments and working on an album. David Ramirez is your guy for that.
Absolutely.
So thank you to David again. Thank you to Evan Fernald. And if you're ever in Nashville, check out Belonging Co. They got services on Sunday and Tuesday nights, by the way. Didn't y'all start with Tuesday nights?
That's the OG service. Yeah, Tuesday night, 7:30.
Thanks, guys, for viewing, and we'll see you next week.